New jitters really across the world tonight about what the United States might do to respond to this major attack in Saudi Arabia. In a moment, we'll turn to a very special expert on this topic, President Obama's UN ambassador, Samantha Power, who also served in the National Security Council. And all of it ran pretty differently under the prior administration. Today's NSC is often forced to make policy on the fly in response to tweets, like President Trump's announcement today that the U.S. is, quote, locked and loaded for a strike. And he says it's, quote, looking like Iran is responsible for hitting one of the world's biggest oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. U.S. intel has confirmed the attack was, they believe, launched from Iran. Iran still denies any involvement. The larger questions here are classic dilemmas. How do you make policy with imperfect information? When must America act to save lives and try to prevent the next atrocity without making things worse? Well, long before Samantha Power was tackling those issues in the Obama administration, I want to give you the context. She was actually exploring them, reporting from Bosnia as a foreign correspondent, and then charting the failure of governments to prevent genocide in her Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Problem from Hell. In fact, it was that work that drew her into Obama's orbit originally when he was entering the U.S. Senate, and she made the journey from idealist on the outside to a public servant on the inside, taking up the post of America's top diplomat at the UN. That is, of course, an arena for some of the great foreign policy performances in our post-war era, from Fidel Castro's 4-hour speech in 1960 to Colin Powell's misleading case for starting the Iraq War in 2003. And, you know, who a president sends to the UN actually can reveal their whole policy towards the world. Consider a controversial diplomat who you know, because he just left the Trump administration, John Bolton. He was actually President George W. Bush's recess appointment to the UN. Quite a contrast.
There is no United Nations. There is an international community that occasionally can be led by the only real power left in the world, and that's the United States, when it suits our interest and when we can get others to go along.
Make no mistake, the engagement of women in peace and security does not reflect a desire for disengagement by men. The principle that guides us is respect for the rights and dignity of all. Just as all benefit from peace, so all must help to create peace.
And now we'll hear from our expert, our next guest, making her debut on The Beat, Samantha Power. The new book is The Education of an Idealist. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
Let's start with the book, and then we can get to Iran and all the other Trump stuff. You detail a certain approach to these often life and death questions. And the way you detail it is your journey and what you learned, but also following the lead of this president. So reading briefly from your book, you say, Obama at times would seem restless and unsatisfied as he heard from his key advisors, but he also gave little hint of the course of action he favored. If he laid out his thinking, those who disagreed might silence themselves, or what he said could also land in the press. What was important about that?
Well, President Obama famously said he wanted to create a kind of team of rivals, and initially that meant bringing his Democratic primary opponent, Hillary Clinton, into the cabinet. But throughout his presidency, it meant ensuring that he heard the full range of viewpoints from people who worked on national security. And, for instance, one of the stories I tell in the book is if I came into a meeting and I was on the backbench in the first 4 years as his human rights advisor, you know, I would think that I was bearing a poker face and not indicating one view, one way or the other, given that I wasn't at the table. And he'd say, I see Samantha frowning over there. What's on your mind? You know, welcoming something that was critical of what was being said in order to force somebody else to respond to that, in order to try to land in the best place, all things considered. And God knows the president is considering, or at least back then was considering, all things. So, and then, of course, he didn't want to make policy or announce policy publicly until we brought our allies on board, until we built coalitions that would enable us never to be going alone, but to be, catalyzing coalitions and being in the best position we could be to succeed.
Yeah, and you focus a lot on the role of idealism. There are all kinds of criticisms of, obviously, American foreign policy and the projection of power, all the hypocrisies. And yet, you seem to write about a time when it was at least understood that there was value in reaching for idealism, even when we do fall short. And so with that in mind, we put together a little bit of recent presidents talking about diversity and inclusion on the global stage. Take a look.
America counts millions of Muslims amongst our citizens. And Muslims make an incredibly valuable contribution to our country.
I've come here to Cairo to seek a new beginning between the United States and Muslims around the world, one based on mutual interest and mutual respect.
How important was that messaging and that leadership in your work, and where do you see it lacking in today's administration?
Where to start? Well, I think you start trying to build trust, partly for its own sake. It's just generally a good idea to be trusted in the world, to have the respect of other peoples, to not be alienating people, which can even be a source of radicalization in some quarters. But trust is also money in the bank. It's when you then go to build a coalition to end the Ebola epidemic, as Obama did back in 2014, 2015. There are countries willing to take your call, believe your evidence because you're not lying to the world and to the American people, as our current president does. And that's what enables you to go to China in advance of the Paris climate negotiations in order to get China to commit to doing something that it had no intention of doing, because China feels we got to develop, we got to industrialize, and then we turn around and we say, hey, but you got to stop halfway and do it our way, because now we've decided that the planet matters. But when you have built up that political capital, it makes it much easier to build those coalitions. And I worry, I mean, the case that we deal with today, when the president has no credibility, when there isn't the kind of process that I've just described for you, where alternative viewpoints are heard, where expertise is valued, when we don't even have a director of national intelligence, which is the position created in order to ensure that the different intelligence community viewpoints, because there's a range of viewpoints even within the intelligence community, usually on most hard issues, but that sort of synthesis and that streamlining, we don't even have a person in that job or in the deputy job. You really worry that it's hard enough in the world, and we can see in the Obama administration how difficult it was to achieve our objectives, even with good process. But when that goes out the window, it's extremely hard to build the coalitions we need to deal with transnational threats, which is the essence of what we face today and will continue to face going forward.
Right. So, and you're talking credibility. That seems to be another difference that's not left-right, but sort of pre- and post-Trump. Because there are detractors of your boss who would say, he promised that you could keep your health care plan, and that wasn't true for everyone. Or he said it wasn't a tax, and the Supreme Court ruled it was a tax. And Bush was accused of lying about all kinds of things. And yet those domestic political disputes seem different from the credibility you bring on the world stage of are you just out of any cred when you deal with these complex problems? And so with that, let's turn to Iran. Let's look at what Donald Trump has been saying on this for your analysis. We don't have it? I'll read it. I think we have Donald Trump saying, let's take a look.
I would certainly meet with Iran if they wanted to meet.
Do you have preconditions for that meeting?
No preconditions, no preconditions. If they want to meet, I'll meet.
Is it one-on-one talks you and the Ayatollah, or you and the president?
It doesn't matter to me. Here's what I want. Anything that gets you to the result
no
for the next 3 years. Not as far as I'm concerned. No preconditions.
What do you see as the cost of his bluster or his lack of credibility, and where should we go on these issues with Saudi Arabia and Iran tonight?
I just note the journey we've been on with President Trump over the course of the last month to 6 weeks. So first, we were minutes away, it seemed, apparently, from a military strike brought about by the U.S. decision to withdraw from an agreement that had peacefully ended Iran's nuclear program. Trump called it off at the last minute, which is a good thing. Trump has succeeded in uniting the world with Iran in opposition to the U.S., given that we are widely seen to be the ones to have unraveled the nuclear deal. Then you play the clip of him wanting to have a face-to-face with no clear sense of what he seeks to achieve through such a face-to-face. We in the Obama administration were very supportive of engaging unsavory regimes. That's the best way to try to change behavior, is actually to sit down and do the hard diplomacy. But there's been no articulation of what the objective of the Trump administration is vis-a-vis Iran, other than punishment for punishment's sake. So that was how many days ago was the summit tweets? And now we're in a world where, again, we're locked and loaded and about potentially to bomb Iran on the basis of intelligence that virtually nobody has been briefed on, or alleged intelligence that nobody has been briefed on. And this happens, Ari, of course, also in the context of Trump's previous attacks on our own intelligence community. Remember when the intelligence community came to the president and said, I'm sorry, Mr. President, I know you want to get out of the deal, but Iran, and I know you want to say that Iran's not complying with the deal, but they're actually complying with the deal. And what did he do? He then tweets, the intelligence community needs to go back to school, ridiculing these professionals who are trying just to bring facts and expertise to bear. So that's the context in which all of this happens. And imagine if you're trying to keep track of where America is, and even if you'd like to stand with the United States against Iran's destabilizing actions, whether in Yemen or if they are in fact responsible for this destructive action, you don't know what to do. You don't know if you're with us on a Monday, what will come out of Trump's thumbs on a Tuesday. It's extremely complex. To build the coalitions, again, you need in order to isolate rogue behavior.
Samantha Power, a perfect guest on a night like tonight. And again, so folks can find it and read it themselves. The book, The Education of an Idealist. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ari.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.